Dear students of 9A, 9B, the lesson, the Cholas, already I have started teaching. You know, few points which I taught in my previous classes, I think you will be able to understand the basic concept of the introduction of this lesson, the Cholas. Now, the points which I have mentioned in the board, according to these points, I shall clarify the meaning of the points. First point, Chola style and art. Second, architecture. Third, Brihadaswara temple and its magnificent architecture. 4. The Chola inscription. 5. Welfare works of the Chola kings. Now, the Chola style and art. You know, the Chola rulers were considered to be great lovers of art and architecture. The Chola rulers. And not only that, the Cholas invested huge amount of money for the constructive works in order to glorify their images. That's why a number of temples were constructed under the special care of the Chola kings. Not only that, they also introduced a good system of art and architecture while constructing their temples. There was a system of Vimana, there was a system of courtyard in front of the temples, there was a system of Garbhagriha where they installed their gods and goddesses, they worshipped. And besides, the early period were simple structures. During the Chola rule, the early periods were very simple in structure. The early temples which were constructed by the Chola kings were very simple in structure. But later, the temples became bigger in size. They invested much more amount of money for the construction of temples. Besides, the main shrine of the temple was called Garbhagriha, as I mentioned earlier. Garbhagriha, where their gods and god and goddess were kept, and they worshipped it. And in front of the Garbhagriha there was a Gopuram. The images were mainly built in bronze and in stone. The images of their god and goddesses were built of stone or stone or bronze metal. And in front of the main shrine there was a audience hall, where this audience hall was known as Mandapa, where people gathered for prayers, and they worship their gods and goddesses. The main feature of the Chola temples are the spacious courtyards, interconnected pillar halls, and magnificent sculptures, the massive towers and vimanas. So these were the important architectural values and features of the Chola temples. The next point, my dear students, architecture. The architecture of the Chola temples were magnificent. As I mentioned earlier, the Chola temples are the spacious courtyards, and these were interconnected with pillars halls and magnificent sculptures, architectures, massive towers and vimanas, Garbhagriha. In front of Garbhagriha there was an audience hall for the visitors who would come to pay and worship their gods and goddesses, and religious ceremonies and meetings also were held in the audience hall. And besides, there was a big temple that was to be discussed, the Brihadaswara temple. The Brihadaswara temple and its magnificent architecture. The Brihadaswara temple was constructed by Raja I, the famous Chola king. Raja I constructed the Brihadaswara temple. The Brihadaswara temple was situated at Tanjavur. Earlier it was known as Tanjore. The Tanjavur, the later capital of the Chola kings, and Chola ruler Raja I constructed the Brihadaswara temple at Tanjavur, their capital place, and it is the best example of the Chola architecture. It was built in 1000 CE, and it was dedicated to Lord Shiva. The bronze image of Lord Shiva as Nataraja, or dance of lord of dance, displays grace and vigor of the Chola kingdom and has been considered as the cultural epitome of the Chola period. Besides, it is said that the entire temple structure is made of granite. It consists of interconnected Nandi Mandapa and pillared portico and an assembly hall for prayer. 57-meter high tower of Vimana comprises 13 stories. That means the Brihadesvara temple consists of 13 stories. 13 stories, and its top is crowned with 8.6-meter high tower of Vimana, and besides 8.6-meter high single block of stone that weighs almost 80 tons. The temple's interior walls, the temple's interior walls are decorated with magnificent sculptures and elaborate paintings. In order to make it attractive for the visitors, Raja I used to come personally to see and watch the activities of the masons, architects, engineers who were associated with the works of the construction of Brihadesvara temple. Another fine example of the Chola architecture is the temple built by the King Rajendra Chola during in his capital. The son of Rajaraja I, Rajendra Chola, also constructed a very beautiful and magnificent temple in his capital, and when he occupied the areas beside the river Ganga, and during that time, he on reaching back to his country, he constructed a magnificent temple there, and he changed the name of his capital. He named it Ganga Konda Cholapuram. He named his capital after the victory of the lands beside the river Ganga. He named it Ganga Konda Cholapuram. The temple is considered to be similar to the temple at Tanjavur. The same technique, same architectural style, same painting, same artistic style also was followed while constructing the temple under the care of Rajendra Chola, the son of Rajaraja I. The paintings and designs on the walls of these temples are considered to be excellent specimens of art. It has been declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. The temple of Rajendra Chola, the temple of Brihadesvara temple of Rajaraja I. The Chola inscriptions informed that the temples were the centers of social activities. There was no school, there was no educational institutions, but only temples were there. So temples were used as educational institutions. Temples and its assembly halls were used for conducting seminars, for conducting religious meetings, for conducting classes under the teachers. The teachers were allowed to teach their students. Students were allowed to come to receive education from their teachers. Teachers were allowed to teach their pupils, and pupils also were allowed to be there to receive education. And by this way, the audience halls which were constructed while constructing the temples, these audience halls were big in size, and these were used for various purposes, for conducting meetings, seminars, religious discussions, and at the same time for conducting classes under many teachers. And that's why these audience halls were used as educational institutions. And at the same time, the students were taught in both Tamil. It is said that the students were taught both in Tamil and Sanskrit. And since texts like Vedas had to be studied, the religious teachings were in Sanskrit. while Tamil was taught to the students as it was the widely spoken language in South India. That's why the teaching was taught through the language Tamil. But whenever the religious discussion was done, during that time, only the teachers they taught it in Sanskrit language. That's why the teachers were supposed to learn the knowledge of Sanskrit, and at the same time, they um, they they were given many facilities by the Chola kings. They gained high respect in the society. The teachers, the Brahmins had high respect in the society, and they led a very prosperous and respectful life, both by the students, both by the students and the kings. And next day, before I discuss about Parantaka 1, I would like to analyze certain points once more, my dear students. The points are: number one, the Cholas constructed a large kingdom. Two famous kings of the Chola dynasty, Raja I and his son Rajendra Chola. Raja I, he extended his empire with a view to establish his superiority. He was a great fighter. At the same time, he was fond of art and architecture. He constructed a number of temples. Out of it, Brihadesvara temple uh, had become a magnificent one. His architecture, its style, its art, its painting, in each and every field, he left a very beautiful image as the most important and famous ruler of the Chola dynasty. Rajaraja I, he Rajaraja I was succeeded by his son Rajendra Chola. Rajendra Chola, he was not only a king, followed the policy of his father, but also followed his own technique and own method. As a result of it, he extended his empire much more than his father. His empire was extended towards the river Ganga, and after establishing his influence towards Bengal, towards the areas of the Ganga river, he commemorate the victory he enjoyed with his countrymen, the victory beside the river Ganga, and changed the name of his capital, named it Gangai Konda Cholapuram. He established trading relations with Ceylon and other foreign countries. The international trade and commerce during the reign of Rajendra Chola reached to its highest extent. As a result of it, during his reign, Rajendra Chola strengthened the economic stability of the country. Rajendra Chola adapted good policies for his countrymen, for the people. People were satisfied with the reign of Rajendra Chola. Rajendra Chola introduced a new system, a new policy, and according to which people had no poverty. Poverty was not there in the country. People almost all were rich, prosperous, and they earned a lot of money, or minimum they were able to meet their minimum requirement, their minimum expenditure because of their adequate amount of earnings. Besides, there were a number of roads were constructed during the reign of Rajendra Chola, and there was a good system of harvest. There was a good system of, supplying water to the agricultural lands through canals. And besides, there was a good system of planting trees for giving shades for the travelers who used to come from abroad to grace the courts of Rajendra Chola. and during scorching rays of sun, they would sit under the trees he planted for the travelers. Besides, there were waiting halls, restrooms for the travelers, and there was no thief in the country. There was no need to steal the ornaments which were kept on the roads, which someone left it on the road. No one was there who touched the ornaments because there was a good system of reward and punishment introduced by Rajendra Chola, and at the same time there was a good system of earning money by the common people, by the mass. That's why there was no poverty in the country, and economic stability of the country was strengthened, and it is due to that reason the kings, both of them, Raja Raja I and Rajendra Chola, were able to spend a lot of money for making their temples very much beautiful, attractive, and magnificent for the next generation, so that the people of the world must recall the images of the two respective kings, the Raja Raja I and Rajendra Chola. Up to this, my dear students, thank you.